Hey, this is Al from Decent Boys, back at it again with another Tescos video. In the last episode we tried to work on the shelf block, and in this episode we're going to try and fix the shelf block some more. In the last episode we made the model for the shelf block and made it take the shape of a shelf, but the actual block shape was still a cube and didn't match. Today we're going to fix the block shape to match the model. We tried to fix the block shape last episode using the tutorial, but something we did went wrong. After reading it properly, I saw there's a method that a block has that returns its shape. We need to override this method to return our custom shape, rather than the default implementation of this method, which just returns a cube. Okay, let's see if we fix the shape of the block. And look at that, it's perfect. The shape of the block matches up perfectly. Now you'll notice as I'm running through it, there's no collision detection, which was a bit unusual, and at the time I didn't know what it was, which is why you can see me messing around with it. But the other thing I checked while I was here is I double checked that the texture culling was no longer occurring. You see I get a weird lighting glitch here. I still don't know what that is, but I never encountered it again, so I just ignored it. I found it really useful whenever I made a small change to keep testing and placing the block down just to check that everything was working as intended so far. I wanted to try and fix the collision on the block, and about 5 seconds later I realised it was because I'd included a part in the constructor that told it not to block movement. So all I did was delete this part of the line, and it works perfectly. Next I wanted to fix the texture culling on the block, so I did the complete opposite of last time and made every single face of the block cull the texture. This was so I could systematically remove the texture culling of textures that don't need to be culled. What we should be left with is a model that culls as often as possible, but still doesn't cause glitches. The model will then be as efficient as possible. Even though every side was culled, there were still some glitches. This is because even though a side of the block may be obscured by a block, it's still able to be seen by the player, so we should still render it. The two textures this happens for is the top of the base and the front face of the wall of the shelf, so these should always be rendered. You can see from this footage that I got the top of the base to not cull, but I didn't get the right side of the wall to not cull. I simply found the right side of the wall and changed this in the file.
Like a headline. Yeah, I pulled up in that monster, it was a red eye. Girl, I pull up on you on my spec line. Real hood, baby, let me tell the deadline. Coming through the back of the door, I'm not in line. As you trouble, coming like a drum line. As you die, bad in your headline. I'm passing out. Press the button, tip, I'm passing out. Tell people, bro, you do that bad side. Hope you want to 20 bands out. I let Dre go.
You might have noticed the shelf block looks wrong in the hotbar. I tried to fix this, but always seem to get it wrong. I'm going to add one collective bonk for all of my failed attempts to get the rotation right in the hotbar. Eventually I kinda just gave up trying. We can always go back and fix that later. I also learnt that if you press F3 and T, you can reload the resources of the game without having to restart the whole client, which meant debugging the resources that I was making happened a lot quicker now. The next day, I began work on the most important feature of the shelf block: block states. If you've played Minecraft for a while, you might have seen this word. Blocks in Minecraft can have properties that tell you information about that block. For example, grass can either be snowy or not snowy. Stair blocks and chests face a particular direction, and note blocks remember a particular note. The snowiness of a grass block, the direction of a stair, the note of a note block are all properties of that block. Whenever one of these blocks is placed, it can have any combination of its properties. These combinations of properties are called block states. Depending on the block state and the combination of properties, the block might look or even act differently. You may have noticed that shelves are only able to face one direction. To fix this, I tried to give shelf blocks a direction property, so a shelf can face either north, east, south, or west. I made a new file in the mod's resource files to store the possible block states of the shelf, if it was any of these directions. The Minecraft wiki and the Forge wiki were a great help with this part. Now let's take a look to see if it worked. No. Not only was the shape of the block always facing the same way still, the block model now didn't even load. I thought it was to do with the typo in the block states file, but even after I fixed the typo, the same problem still occurred. I spent a long time looking on the Minecraft and Forge wikis, and it took me way longer than it should have done to find the right part of the Forge wiki to tell me what I was doing wrong. It turns out that the resource file for the block states only specifies which combination of properties gives which model, but it doesn't specify when a block should have certain properties. You actually need to tell the block when it's facing east or has snow on it inside the block's code. From here I can specify that the block state of a shelf block has a direction associated with the way it faces. I looked at the source code of oak stairs as they have a direction property, and my shelves needed this same property. I tried copying the way that oak stairs did it because I assumed that the guys at Mojang probably had some idea of what they were doing, but I didn't really know what I was doing when I was copying this. I gave it a whirl though. And then it's always time for the scariest part to actually see if it worked. Of course it wouldn't work. Why would it? It's me we're talking about. So now they're doing something even weirder. So the model faces one direction and the shape faces another direction, and neither of them change direction, and they're not in the same direction. What the fuck? I went back to the Forge wiki to figure out where I went wrong. Then in the new method I overwrote, I added a new bit of code to add a default block state for our block. It's useful to have a default block state to make editing different block states easier. Alright, take your bets if this is going to work or not. Yeah, it didn't work. This happened because the code isn't supposed to go in the fill state container method, so I just deleted it for now. I can add it back in the right place later. So let's sum up what we did today. Today, we fixed our mistake from last episode and overrode the getShape method to make the shape of our block the same shape as the model. We also worked on adding block states to the shelf block so we can add direction to our shelves. We set up the resource file that applies the correct model for a certain block state, but we still got models facing one direction. We started to code a direction property and a block state into our shelf block, but we still ended up with shelves facing only one direction, just a bit funkier this time. We tried to add a default block state, but ended up breaking the mod entirely by trying. Next episode, we still need to add direction to the shelves, but we're getting closer, so let's keep trying and not give up.